there. We can edit it up there, whatever way,
Oh
there in a
yeah.
minute. So I just, hey, do you want to introduce yourself there, John?
Well, my name is John Wilson. I first came to public attention in 2013 as one of the two Garda whistleblowers. Maurice McCabe was the other one. I have met some wonderful people over the last 12 years or so, people that have inspired me, and they have given me support on the darkest days, let's say. I joined in Garda Síochána on the 22nd of September 1982. I'll always remember the lonely journey down because my childhood, I kind of spent I was born in Cavan, and I spent most of my time on the farm. I didn't really go anywhere except that I used to go and up to my aunt and uncle up on Lissadell Road in Drimnagh on holidays during the summer months. But by and large, I was I was my own best friend. I mean, I didn't really have a large coterie of friends, and I wasn't a very confident young fella. I was very, I was a very shy, I was actually painfully shy. People can't believe that now, but I actually was. And I credit the Garda training for turning me into the monster that I am today.
You know, it's very,
that I am today.
yeah, it's very interesting. One thing that you actually said there, that when you joined the Garda Síochána, that you were very shy, and one thing that I noticed, like with lots of different people I spoke to, some members of the Garda, and also
Yeah.
some people that had issues and so on and so forth with members of the Garda,
Mm.
and I know myself with growing up with a couple of people I knew that joined the Garda, they were always very shy, somewhat inside the community, and they all seemed to become guards. And whatever happened in Templemore seemed to completely change so many of them. And it was, again, whatever the reason for that is. But when did you realize yourself after you joined the Garda Síochána? When did you start to realize that there was actually problems?
On the first day, it's not like now. On the first day I joined in Garda Síochána, I was a full member of Garda Síochána. I was sworn in on the 22nd of September 1982. And we all gathered together in the big hall down in Templemore, or the Garda Training Centre as it was then, not the Garda College that it is now. It's got way more sophisticated than it was in my day. But we were told that we were members of a family, that we were members of the Garda family, and that we could only depend on our colleagues. Now, I've heard Garda commissioners over the years referring to the Guards as the Garda family, and it's important to remember that the mafia is also a family. But we were taught that we could only depend on our colleagues. That to paraphrase, the kind of an example being that the barbarians were at the gate and we were inside, and we could only rely on each other for support and for help. And unfortunately, that mantra led to an awful lot of corruption within the Garda Síochána throughout the years. That's my own opinion. To be honest with you, I really, I was an accidental policeman. I was an accidental Garda. I never had any intention joining the Guards. And when I was in fifth year in St. Patrick's College in Cavan, we had to do mock interviews for various employments, and they invited in various employers, and we had a choice to go to be interviewed by kind of an engineer or some manufacturing company or whatever, different jobs. And I chose to be interviewed by the Guards. I chose to do a Guard interview. And the two gentlemen, and of course, I thought I was a font of knowledge because I grew up watching American cop shows like Kojak and the Rockford Files and Starsky and Hutch and the Hawaii Five-0. But I did an interview with them, and I'm sure they thought I was an Egypt. But anyhow, they were very polite. Two men from the local Garda station. They were very, very polite, and that's when that's when the idea started circulating in my little mind at the time. And at that time you had to be 19 years of age to join in Garda Síochána, and I had just turned 18. And of course, when you're 18 years of age, 12 months is it's never going to come. It's a long time. It's way in the future. Sadly, that's not the case anymore. But as you get older, time goes faster. But anyhow, I was out milking the cows. We had no milking machine. We used to milk cows by hand, and people now think that's, oh my God, that's back in the Stone Age, but it's only just over 40 years ago. And I was milking a cow out in the byre, and my mother came out with the Sunday Press. Being a good Fianna Fáil family at the time, we always bought the Sunday Press. And she said they're taking in guards now at 18 years of age. So the next day, Monday, I went into the old Cavan Garda station, and I spoke to a man called Sergeant Tony McLaughlin, and I know exactly where I was sitting, and I know where he was sitting. God immerse him. He ended up as an inspector. He died a couple of years ago. And I applied to join in Garda Síochána, and that was in 1981. In May, April, beginning of May 1981. And I had to do the exam because my academic qualifications weren't great at the time. I was a dreamer. I wasn't a studier. I mean, all my knowledge I'd garnered from life, not from books or from going to school. But but you can't join the guards now doing what I did. But anyhow, I was successful. I then headed off down. It was a very lonely day. Good God Almighty, it was very lonely. I was miserable the day I joined the guards. I headed off down with a neighbour of mine. He's actually still alive, thank God. And he drove down. I sat in the front. My poor old mammy sat in the back, and we went down to Templemore. And then I had to say goodbye. Sorry, it was memories. But anyhow,
Are you okay?
yeah. Just sorry. But anyhow, the rest is history, so to speak. But anyhow, the day after I was sworn in, we had our first lesson, our first class. Just my mummy died; she's gone. Well, the first class, and we were taught to enforce the laws of the land without fear, favour, malice, or ill will. That we had to enforce the laws of the land without fear, favour, malice, or ill will. We had to enforce the laws equally to everybody. That class should have started off once upon a time, because that was a fairy tale, as I learned soon afterwards. And I was full of joy, I was going to be, there was this kind of, how would I say, I thought that honesty was going to be, everything was going to be honest and straightforward. And I was
going to catch all the bad guys and do all the right things.
Yeah. But I mean, I didn't, I was going to be, I was looking forward to my career. And as the training went on, then I got more confident and whatever. And when I passed out, there are days in life that we can describe as being perfect days. There were a few days during our lifetime that we can describe as being perfect days. And the day that I passed out was one of those days. It was a perfect day, and really enjoyed my family, my mother and father, my brothers and sister were there, and fantastic day, wonderful day. I was then transferred up the Peter Street in Dublin, and I was put on to Unit D. That's where I first met Martin Callan, and I met him subsequently. That's another story. But anyhow, my first beat was out on around Wellington Quay, Aston Quay, Westmoreland Street, along the quays, and I was fascinated. I was taken on the beat by another guard called John Keelan. My first beat, and I was absolutely flabbergasted and fascinated. All the bright lights and whatever, and it was wonderful. Like, it was like a scene from one of the cop shows that I watched. It was like New York to me, wandering around Burgh Quay and Wellington Quay. But anyhow, I got my feet under the table, and I started becoming kind of very active. And of course, I spent an awful lot of time doing protection posts up in Dáil, outside Dáil. And as a young fella, you don't want to be stuck standing outside the door. You want to be flying around in a patrol car with the siren on it. That's normal.
Of course.
Looking back, I was a fucking idiot. I should have stayed there and had lots of money. But anyhow, I couldn't wait to get out of the place. So a few years later, then I transferred up to Kilmainham, and I thought I knew everything about policing until I went into the A district. The A district was Kevin Street, It comprises Kevin Street. It still does. Kevin Street and Kilmainham. And I realised after I had almost 4 years, just between 3 and 4 years service when I ended up in Kilmainham. I realised I knew nothing about policing until I got to Kilmainham. At that time, the A district had the highest number of convicted people in all of Europe. I spent my time interacting with criminals, and I spent over 10 years in Kilmainham. I absolutely loved it, absolutely loved it, and I got to meet an awful lot of the top criminals in Ireland at the time. But after 10 years, and we used to cover St James's Hospital, and we'd have to go in and to identify BIDs, brought in deads, and I wasn't a great. I still am. I'm not a great. I don't like death. It's the only fear I have, Kieran, is death. I'm not, I see myself as being Mr. Big Brave Man, but death, death.
Yeah.
I'm not. There's something about dying. I'm afraid of dying. It's really the only fear I have.
Yeah, I guess I'm the opposite with that. I have absolutely no fear of that at all. It's something.
Well,
something that is.
God.
Yeah,
I
me
believe
too.
in God. Yeah, but I must admit, I must admit, I do have the fear of dying. But Kilmainham, what really about Kilmainham, I met an awful lot of young people. I saw young people. There was a serious drug problem at the time, and the A district was a major hub for drug dealing and for people with serious drug addictions. And I saw people literally dying before my eyes. Young people, the best of young people, they were addicted to heroin. They were getting no help, no supports. And at that stage, AIDS had taken hold as well. And it was horrific. And I remember arresting this young fella. I arrested him up in Rialto in a plaster mold manufacturing plant, or factory. A little factory. And this young fella, he was skinny as a rake. I arrested him for burglary. And he said, "Oh, don't hit me, don't hit me, don't hit me." So I'm not going to fucking touch you. So I arrested him anyway. And I charged him with burglary. And he was remanded to appear before, he was bailed to appear before Kilmainham District Court. And of course, he didn't turn up because, of course, a lot of people addicted to drugs. They don't know what day of the week it is. So he didn't turn up. And there was a bench warrant issued for him. And a couple of weeks later, I got a call. We got a call that there was a body found up in a flat in Dolphin House. And I went up with a colleague of mine, and I saw this bloated figure sitting on a couch with a needle stuck in his left arm, and it was the same young fella that I'd arrested a few weeks earlier. Just, heartbreaking.
Yeah. When did you see, you were, say, the first 10 years of in the Garda Síochána, where you were saying about the corruption and everything else that was involved in that? When you went in first, did you see it get worse over the years, or was it the same, or was it the same actors? Was it a small amount of Gardaí that were involved in the corruption, or was it more broader, or what way was that?
You see, doing favours for people wasn't seen as corruption, Kieran. Doing favours for people, squaring tickets, whatever, it wasn't seen as corruption. But when the penalty point system came in, it wasn't a case of just squaring a ticket. For many years, getting a speeding ticket or getting a ticket for some other offence, it just necessitated paying the fine, and that was it. But once penalty points come in, penalty points were a game changer. Because if you got a speeding ticket, and the fine is one thing, but having penalty points on your license, it's a very serious issue for many people, because it affects your insurance premiums as well. Your insurance will become more expensive. But just getting back, I wandered on to Kilmainham, but I first realized I was only in Pearse Street a very short time when I realized that. All wasn't well. I was out one day on the beat. It's actually in the documentary, The Garda Who Limped. It was a documentary made about me about 10 years ago or so. I was out on the beat, and I got a phone call from a sergeant to return to the station to take a phone call. I was told there's a very important man going to ring you in a while. So I wandered back to the station. And I went in and I spoke to the sergeant. I had to go to his office, and there was another guard there as well. And of course, they bloody knew. They knew what the phone call was about, but they didn't tell me. So I got a phone call from a prominent politician at the time. I've never named him yet, but a prominent politician, and I'd
and you're not going to name him today.
You never know. He asked me. He says, "Oh, you know, I apparently I had stopped his secretary for something, but there could be no tax, no seatbelt. I can't actually remember the offence, and I'd summoned them to go to court." And he kind of he says, "Could you take care of it or whatever, you know?" And just chatting away, and I realized very quickly that that was the thing to do. That if I hadn't taken care of the summons, that things might have got very, very awkward for me. And I did. And at that stage, I was part of the system. I was no different than anyone else at that stage. And that actually bugged me, you know. But as I learned much later, when I had to withstand the many brickbats that were thrown my direction back in 2000, you know, between 2000 and around 2012, 2013, if I had refused to square that summons back in 1983 or early 84, I don't know if I would have survived in Garda Síochána for as long as I did. I'm giving you the synopsized version of what happened because I could be here all day if I discussed all the whistleblowing stuff. But it was just the thing to do. Anybody with connections, even today, or you know, getting a speeding ticket for many people, it's a serious issue. That kind of it causes worry to people, right? And for many other people, receiving a speeding ticket was just a mere irritation that necessitated a phone call for the irritation to go away. That was it. And as was highlighted in the penalty point scandal, and I know Maurice McCabe was the sergeant, and Maurice McCabe was abused so badly by the Garda authorities that he came close to taking his own life. That's in the documentary. I'm not telling tales out of school. That was in the documentary that was broadcast on RTE about his life. And he was driven. There was a vicious, and that's why I don't. When I hear a rumor or whatever, I don't spread stories, because the damage that was done to that man by a false rumor about sexual impropriety, it nearly drove him to taking his own life, and that's well documented. I don't have to rake over old ground.
Yeah, I remember well.
Yeah, I know I'm giving the synopsized version of everything, but when I then ended up, I went then from, after 10 years, I went to, from 1987, I transferred out to Lucan and Leaks about that direction. And then in 2001, when I moved down to Cavan, I transferred to Cavan Mon, the Cavan Monaghan division. I ended up in Emyvale for a short while, and I had been fighting. I was the first uniformed guard officer to have a beard in the history of Garda Síochána. I fought that damn case, and I started fighting back in 1988, and I got nowhere because it was one of their most sacrosanct rules, Kieran. You had to be clean shaven. And there's a former colleague of mine in Clones. He told me that there was a time back in the early 70s where guards used to wear, they used to wear sideburns, or locks they were called, okay? And he relayed the story to me about this senior officer came in one day, a chief superintendent came in one day with a ruler, and he actually measured a guard's sideburns. You couldn't make this crap up. But anyhow, I went to Emyvale and I wrote a letter to the sergeant in charge that says, I wanted to bring the case to a head about the beard because I have a skin condition, it's folliculitis barbae, the hair, you don't want to lessen this, but the hair doesn't grow out normally. You have to wait until it comes out before you can actually shave it. If you shave every day, you cut the face off yourself. A lot of black men have this condition. Anyhow, I wrote a letter informing the sergeant, who subsequently informed the superintendent that I said I wasn't going, from a particular date, I wasn't going to shave anymore. Okay, so I was on rest days, and I arrived into work in uniform with heavy stubble, and at 5:45 in the morning one morning, right, and there was a reception committee waiting for me a sergeant, it's the superintendent and a sergeant from Monaghan had come out, and I was called aside and told, John, we can't let you out in uniform with a beard. I kid you not, right? I kid you not. So I says, fine, I'm not going to shave. So I was transferred from Emmyvale into Monaghan town, and I was confined up in the attic in the communications room. I was locked up in the communications room, and I started fighting, and I got on to the Garda Representative Association, and of course, I'm sure they all thought this was a big laugh. Jockey, or that's what it was called. Jockey wants to wear a beard, wants to grow a beard. But anyhow, they got legal advice. I wanted to go. I was threatened to go all the way to the European Court of Human Rights, and the GRA, I'd say, to get me off their backs, they sought legal advice from a prominent senior counsel. He was a former AG. I can't recall. I'm getting can't recall his name. But anyhow, the legal advice was for the Garda Commissioner to stop digging, that he was in the hole, that if he didn't allow me to grow my beard, it was going to end up very costly for the state. And I was given permission to grow a beard in uniform. I was the first uniformed member of the Garda Síochána in history. The first ever member of Garda Síochána to have a beard in uniform, it's called to wear a beard in uniform, is how they call it in the regulations. And then I applied to get out of my prison cell in County Monaghan, which actually I didn't mind. I was watching CSI at night time between answering the phone and whatever, But anyhow, I went home. I was transferred to Clonus on the 22nd of October. At the end, I think 22nd in October 2002, and that's where I first met Maurice McCabe. Okay. And he ran a very tight ship. He ran a very tight ship. He was very, you had to kind of everything prim and proper with Maurice, because there was no second best. And we weren't really friends. We just, kind of, hello, how are you? Look, he'd send me out on the beat or whatever. But 3 months later, he called me into his office, and he says, John, he says, when you arrived here, before you arrived here, I was told that you were a troublemaker, and I was to watch you and keep a very close eye on you. And he says, that's obviously rubbish. He said, you're the best worker I have in the place, right? And at that moment, I arrived there on the 22nd of October 2002, and at that moment, I really I garnered a great respect for that man. And for the next couple, he was transferred in the middle of 2024. He was transferred up to Ballyaborough to clean it up, because Ballyaborough was out of control at the time, right? And in the meantime, myself and Maurice, we were out back, and we ran over a couple of times, and we worked very, 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 very well together from the point we had a conversation until he left for Ballyaborough. I think it's in August 2004. And over the next 4 years, until 2008, we had very little contact. Maybe might meet him an odd time in court, and hello, how are you, right? But in 2008, in 2008, there was a vicious rumor circulating, about Maurice McCabe within the division. Now we know what the rumor was subsequently from the tribunal. And a vicious rumor in the middle of 2008. And instead of, sometime, I'm losing track of time, but in around, I think it was the last chords, was it September, October, the middle to the latter end of 2008. And instead of kind of spreading the rumor, I immediately I heard the rumor. I phoned Maurice McCabe. And he said, John, he says, you have no idea what's been happening in my life. And we subsequently met up, and he outlined to me the serious difficulties that he was having in Ballyaborough. And we got talking about the penalty points and whatever. And the rest is history. The rest is history.